Hello and welcome to Legislative Report with your state representative, Warren Kampf. I'm your host, Laurie Bull. And today on this episode, we're going to be starting off the episode talking about the state budget that passed both the House and the Senate and was signed by the governor on time and early. So welcome, Representative Kampf.
Hi, Laurie.
Good to have you. And it's good to have you at a time where we can talk positively about this spending plan that passed on time. The spending was below the rate of inflation, and it funds all the core priorities.
Right. So, and let's add that at least in our chamber, I think it's the same in the Senate, it was wildly popular. I think only just a very few representatives voted against the final appropriations bill. And there is no tax bill because there are no tax increases in this. Lots of great things in the legislation, lots of great things in the budget, and as you mentioned, ahead of schedule. The last couple of years we've had some difficulties meeting that timeline, but this year we beat it.
Well, how did we get here? Would you say the past couple of years have kind of set the stage to get us to the point this year that it was a little easier to take on?
I think so. I mean, I think there are a lot of factors at play with that. Our revenues, meaning tax collections, are up, and that has been helpful. In addition to that, over the last few years, we've certainly done some cost-saving work on the spend side to try to keep some of the pieces of the budget that tend to grow a lot in check, and that set us up with a good revenue picture to be able to pass a budget on time and not to add any new fees or taxes with it.
And education is a big winner in this budget, and really all facets of education. Pre-K through 12 education was increased by $450 million. So a portion of that goes to PSERS, which I know is important to you.
Mm-hmm. Right, so education in every area of the state is important and a priority. Certainly it is in my area. Mm-hmm. So the state budget does contribute to my local schools. I want to say each one of the districts received about a 5% increase, millions of dollars more when it's all added up than the year before. And, as you said, the number is about an additional $450 million if you add everything together. There are a bunch of line items. Basic education is the main line item. That's where most of the money is driven out. I think that total line item is north of $5 billion, and we increased that consistent with the governor's request. Again, a bipartisan piece of this budget by $100 million. And then we also prioritized pre-K, trying to add as many more children as possible to a quality pre-K in my area and across the state. We increased special education funding. We increased Head Start and early intervention. So definitely a focus on education. You mentioned PSERS. For the folks who are watching, that's our state school pension fund. And this is one of our chronic difficulties when folks in our local school community say we want to have more money in the classroom. I always respond, look, we are spending this year 10% of our state budget to make our annual pension contributions, not just for the teachers fund, although that's a big portion of it. But 10% or something like $3 billion out of a $32.5 billion budget is an enormous amount of money. And when you have to do that, it remains difficult for us to add a great deal more money for other things. Now, I know the school districts face about 5% of their state budget goes toward, or their local budgets goes towards their contribution for the pension funds. But We managed this year to make that contribution. It's $224 million more than it was last year. That's actually, I think, about half of the additional money that we received in kind of the growth in the economy. So to be able to provide hundreds of millions of more dollars for lots of things, including classrooms, and make that payment is nothing short of excellent, and I'm glad that we're able to do it.
Two other areas in education, career and technical education, saw an increase of $30 million, and also EITC. Why is that an important program?
Right, so EITC is the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, and this has really been a driving item of our caucus. And what it has allowed people to do is access education dollars for things that are both related to traditional public schools, but also, especially in the most challenged areas of the state, access an education that they're just not able to get otherwise. And the way this works is a corporation will give money to an educational foundation or to a particular school, which is EITC qualified, and that school will turn around and be able to offer scholarships to children who would not be able to afford attendance at that school without those monies. And the corporations get a tax credit. So this year we bumped that up by $25 million. I think we're in total north of $200 million a year in tax credits for that. And it, in my area, it serves so many purposes. The public schools often have a foundation associated with them for buying laptops and providing, fully equipped backpacks for children who can't afford these things when they go to public school, and then also for the local private schools that want to offer opportunity to children who are disadvantaged. They can do that and still make ends meet. And then you mentioned career and technical education. That really has been a focus of, I would say, the entire state government, not just the Republican caucus in the House, but everyone. There's this concept out there that we have a lot of job openings across the country, and individuals perhaps don't arrive for an interview or for that job with quite the skills that are necessary for the modern economy. And there are all kinds of reasons for that. But focusing dollars and thought on how to make our curriculum and our schools, both high school and college and community colleges, more able to train for the current economy and the future economy, as what we've been doing. And this year we added, I want to say, $30 million or something along those lines towards those initiatives. That will certainly help, and this time it's absolutely the right thing to do.
The legislature also responded to an unfortunate series of events, which is the problems we're having in schools with school shootings, and the response was a $60 million commitment for school safety. So these are grants, I believe, that schools can apply for to help, enhance their safety measures at their schools.
Right, and the list of things that you would be able to use as a school district that money for is quite long. And the idea there was to give as much flexibility to local districts. Perhaps some feel that they're in good shape, but others may want some kind of a hardening or an increase in the infrastructure of security. Others might want to explore something related to mental health or training, with respect to identifying bullying or whatnot. And I think those sorts of initiatives are going to be covered by this grant program. And this raises actually a larger subject. You mentioned that the legislature responded. $60 million is certainly a lot of money. But I think that the legislature needs to go farther. I've been pressing for meaningful changes in our gun laws. We need to close the loophole for private sales of long guns without a background check that currently exists in Pennsylvania. There's a law on red flag, where if an individual is threatening to harm themselves or harm others, a family member, a law enforcement officer can go in and with some proof get an order from a court in order to seize those firearms from that person before something bad happens. Of course, as you mentioned, we've seen recent tragedies and awful killings in our schools and other places around the country. And so that kind of legislation, I think, is important. We are perhaps today about to move legislation with respect to firearms and domestic violence. So we need to do some of that. We need to have also a very clear look at our mental health system, how we deliver services. Are there gaps in that, things that we're not doing that we need to do? And I've got a resolution in the Health Committee, I believe, right now I'm trying to get out, which would have a fairly quick study of that system for young people to make some recommendations that we might follow. So it's a broad subject, but this budget definitely addresses it by giving flexibility and ample dollars, I think, to improve security in our schools.
And along the safety lines, the state police will be getting additional dollars, and they're being asked to patrol further and further out as many local police departments are dissolving and communities are going in favor of using state police to serve their communities.
Right. So in my district, we don't have state police service except on our state highways or in very limited situations. We're glad for that service. But around the state and even in some of the local counties where where I live and where the district is, there are places where the locals either have a long time not had a local police force, or they're opting to have state police service, and that's placing a demand on state police budgets and complements. So this year's budget adds more money for new trooper classes. There are retirements every year. And so that's another element of the budget that was necessary.
Well, this seems like a good place to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue discussing the budget, and we'll pick up on a few more other things that you're working on as well.
Okay.
So we'll be back in just a moment. Legislative Report will continue.
Did you know that in the corridors in the first floor of the capital of Pennsylvania, there are nearly 400 individual mosaics? The idea for creating these intricate tiles was first suggested by Henry C. Mercer in 1902. A year later, he received the commission to prove 16,000 square feet of pavement tiles for the Great Rotunda and corridors of the new state capitol building in Harrisburg. Mercer set about designing subjects for approximately 400 mosaics. He chose as his general theme the history of Pennsylvania, and he soon realized that his tiles could tell stories. Although the arrangement seems random, the mosaics are very thoughtfully placed in the floor. The tile sequence is roughly chronological, beginning at one end with the scenes depicting the Native Americans. The mosaics progress into the story of European habitation in the New World and encompass the Commonwealth's triumph through process and intervention. Now you know.
Did you know that Act 16 of 1999 honors one of the greatest leaders in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives? The Matthew J. Ryan Legislative Office Building, once known as the Capitol Annex, is located next to the main Capitol building and honors the late Speaker of the House, Matthew J. Ryan. Those who visit this building will observe the magnificent architectural designs providing eloquence and grandeur to the building. Known as one of the greatest members in the history of the Pennsylvania State House, Matthew Ryan started his career in the legislature in 1963 and was elected Speaker in 1981. His charisma and knowledge will forever be reflected in the building now named after this great legislative leader. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. We're discussing the new state budget with State Representative Warren Kampf. As we left, we had discussed the benefits to education, to safety, things like that. Let's move on to human services. There were quite a number of highlights there. Additional money, there's a waiting list for individuals with intellectual disabilities that are trying to get services. This would help an additional 965 people get services. What are some of along with that, what are some of the other highlights that you felt were important?
Well, just to pause on the intellectual disabilities subject. So last year we added a very large amount of money. I want to say $90 million was added. And we've been working at this subject of the waiting list. A lot of times these are folks coming out of the school system, so somebody who's over the age of 21 and has a human services waiver given an intellectual disability, someone say with Down syndrome or other intellectual disabilities. And then we also have older Pennsylvanians whose caregivers are passing away. An elderly child who's living with elderly parents. And providing services to those, newcomers who need the help of the government in order to obtain the services and the care they need has been a challenge for us. We've continued to add money, and as I said last year, and then again this year, although at a smaller level, trying to really reduce that waiting list to zero. It's not at zero yet, but this year's increase will help us. In addition to that, one thing I've focused a fair amount on, my father just passed away a couple of months ago, is the nursing home care. A lot of those beds are Medicaid, so that's where somebody has spent down all their resources, and trying to increase care for those and for people who want to age in place if they're able to do that, if they don't need round-the-clock care. We've added resources in both of those line items this year in order to try to deliver care at the best level possible. But it's serious business for us. Pennsylvania is an older state, meaning there are more older people here in our state than there are in many of our sister states. And so providing those resources is a constantly increasing demand for us.
Yeah, and another one, the budget includes funds to provide evidence-based home visiting services to 800 families affected by the opioid epidemic. So that's something we need to continue to watch.
Right, and the opioid epidemic, we've had some successes when it comes to Narcan and being able to save lives. We've had some successes with the program, which requires, it's a law, requires doctors and physicians to report when they're giving any prescriptions for opioids, and reduction in prescriptions has occurred. We've also mandated coming out of the ER or for minors, shortening up the length of time that a prescription is for. But we've also not been able to really reduce the increase or the number of overdoses that end in death are occurring. So this is a problem that we need to keep after with every day. And home visits, following through with individuals who've identified to us that they're addicted and at risk is a piece of that.
Yeah, and along similar lines, veterans' homes, it's important to take care of those who have fought for us, and there's an additional $5.7 million increase for veterans' homes.
Right, and I mean, we have, I think, 6 veterans' homes in Pennsylvania. There's actually a push to add a 7th, as I said, lots of older Pennsylvanians, many of them who served in the military, are in need of these services, and so adding resources to that line item for those who served and kept us free is obviously also a priority. And I'm glad that we're able to do it. I mean, the fact that the economy is doing nicely in Pennsylvania, and that we've been very good, I think, fiscal managers or fiscal stewards, has allowed us this year to add to some line items that we've long wanted to, and we're unable to do so.
Changing course here, agriculture is Pennsylvania's #1 industry, and an important part of that is the University of Pennsylvania Veterinary School, and it's a partner for those in the agriculture community for their livestock and their animals that they have, but it's also close by to your district.
Sure. So the Penn Vet and New Bolton for folks in Chester County. Yeah. That's where those resources go, and that's critical for for Chester County and for our region and for an institution that is so critical to Pennsylvania. The only vet school in the state of Pennsylvania trains a lot of our veterinarians and of small and large animals, and so it's critical. And in addition to that, we've added some resources as well for what I'll call sort of medical research, life sciences research. That's something that's important everywhere, right? We're talking about leading to cures and immune therapy and gene therapy, but we were able to add some resources to those line items. And in southeastern Pennsylvania, where I'm from, there are a lot of companies and institutions that use those resources to great ends.
And another increase, there's a new Lyme disease line item. We hate that we have to have it, but Lyme disease is becoming more and more prevalent, I'm sure in your area and in central Pennsylvania as well.
Right, and this is the first time that we've had a Lyme disease line item. I'm sure there have been state resources in the past that have been devoted to it, but this is the first time we've had a line item for combating Lyme disease. And definitely in my area, it's something that's not going away and growing.
Well, those are some highlights of the budget. Do you want to just wrap it up and sum up your thoughts on how this spending plan addresses the needs of Pennsylvania?
Well, to me, it adds resources. Of course, we talked about in human services and education, which are very important. In addition to that, has no broad-based tax increases of any kind, so it's watching out for individuals' hard-earned dollars, and bipartisan, right? I mean, this was a very popular bill in both the House and the Senate, and the culmination, I think, of a number of years of reform and good stewardship.
Well, keep up that good work.
All right.
And let's move on to some bills that you're a part of. You're a prime sponsor of a bill that recently passed the House, I believe. It revolves around the idea of eminent domain and the taking of land for certain public purposes. Can you talk about what that bill would do?
Right. Well, just a quick news flash. It's actually a law. It was just signed yesterday by our governor.
Great.
So very exciting for me, and it was my bill. Folks may have seen the issue with Stoneleigh Gardens. This is a property down in Villanova, not in my district, but something that's captured a lot of our local attention, where a local school district had identified it for eminent domain, for a taking to build a school and some fields. The owners of the property, as long ago as 1996, had put a conservation easement on the land on purpose to make it open space, permanent open space, and it actually recently essentially deeded it over, given it to Natural Lands Trust, which is a nonprofit that is a protector of open space across the Commonwealth. And this bill said that, gosh, we really ought to have greater protections, because the current law, until yesterday, had been that if a school district, a municipality, whatever government entity identified a particular piece of property, even if it had been conserved or preserved, they could take it. They just give the just compensation, and that's the end of the matter. So this bill requires, in that setting where there's a conservation easement, that they would have to go to the local county court, and they would have to establish that there was no other place that they could do what they wanted to do, exercising the power of eminent domain, before they would be allowed by the court to do this. So a great success for open space and for preservation, but in my mind, not restricting the public purposes that sometimes eminent domain is necessary to exercise.
And this, you're not just legislating to one particular situation that happened in your district. This does happen elsewhere. It's not just one unique circumstance, I would imagine.
No, that's absolutely true. There's one in the capital region. I've come to learn in Harrisburg, or actually Cumberland County, I think. But this is, as more land is preserved, this is something that we've prioritized over the years, the protection of our natural areas, and putting this limitation on the power of government or those exercising eminent domain is in furtherance of that important policy.
Yeah. You had a second bill recently that passed the House that had to do with capping punitive damages that are levied against nursing homes. Did I get that correct?
So it's actually before the House today on
Okay.
final passage, but we were in front of the House amending it last week. This is an important subject in the world of lawsuits. Mm-hmm. We have about 55,000 Pennsylvanians in our nursing homes. And there have been some what I'll call predatory tactics by, in particular, some law firms from the rest of the country, advertising on TV and in newspapers, and filing quite a lot of claims against our nursing facilities and assisted living facilities. So this would not in any way bar the courts or the individuals who are the victims of negligence from just compensation. Sure. Absolutely, that's available, but it would, to some extent, limit punitive damages, and the purpose of that is almost none of these cases ever go to trial because nursing homes and others are afraid of the possibility of a runaway verdict, and so this limit, 2.5 times compensatory damage, mm-hmm. would be some limit on that and make it a more level playing field. And in the end, what's the purpose of that? It's to get more dollars back into nursing care for our elderly and those in these facilities, rather than into the pockets of mm-hmm. plaintiffs' lawyers.
Well, thank you so much for working on these issues, and thank you for updating your constituents today on everything with the budget and the other things you're working on, and time's up already.
All right, thanks, Lori.
Sure. And that is all the time that we have for today. If you have questions about anything that was discussed today, please feel free to contact Representative Kampf at his contact information, his district office, his website. That will all be shown in just a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us next time for Legislative Report.